All right. Good morning, everybody. We are live. Apologies for the delay. We were talking about the bear and we got sidetracked and other things. Hey, Brian. Hey, Megan.
I just appreciate that I insisted on continuing to talk about the bear, even though I have not seen the third season. I was trying to infer what I could from past seasons, but I'm excited.
I don't want to spoil anything, but Megan and I are far ahead, and I think there's stuff to talk about. As Megan said, she has thoughts.
Yeah, I have thoughts on it. I think the show is fascinating because it's the tone is very inconsistent, and also the pacing of it is insanely stressful at times, and then also very contemplative at times. It's an interesting show.
Ultimately, those are my two favorite things about the show.
Mhm.
Is the tone, the overall structure, the way that it just breaks down structure. Also, the soundtrack absolutely rules. Like the way that
So
they
good.
incorporated
Yeah.
Spider's Kid Smoke into that episode about the ticket machine just continuing to go was one of the greatest things I've ever seen in all of television.
It's a really
Well,
well
let me
done
ask you
show.
guys. Let me ask you guys a question.
It's
I know, Brian,
risks.
you haven't seen the current season, but sometimes when I'm watching that show, I feel like it's trying to figure out if it's a plot show or a character
Mhm.
show, and like I feel like sometimes it's inconsistent and like it goes back and forth, and sometimes, you know what I mean, like sometimes it's like this is all about like, is this restaurant going to work, and then sometimes that's not at all what it's about. But I feel like I want them to choose one, because I feel like sometimes it's like the Sopranos had a perfect balance of those things. It was like not really,
Mm.
there wasn't really a plot, but there was enough of a plot to like keep you engaged, but this it just feels like it feels like some confusion in like what the show is, or is that the point?
Yeah, I feel like there's a real struggle with that sometimes. Like there's moments when you're going really deep with a character and it's slower and contemplative and introspective, and then there's other times when the pace is moving so fast and it's just all about how they can't keep up with the restaurant or something terrible is happening in the restaurant, and they have to overcome this moment, and it seems to go between those two so dramatically that it's hard sometimes for me to understand how I'm feeling when I'm watching the show. I also find the show like incredibly stressful at a lot of the time, which is sometimes hard to watch. But yeah, I agree. It's a struggle between the show. And I can't tell if they're doing a good job of it or if they're doing a bad job of it. I think the highlights of the show are so high that you are kind of willing to deal with the inconsistencies.
I think if you think of the restaurant in a way almost like the house in Northwoods, it almost feels like
Mm,
it's both the plot and the character at the same time. I agree with you, Meg. I think sometimes it really works and sometimes it doesn't. I almost think it's like it's a show that is benefited both by the fact that it has almost no structure. An episode could be 45 to 60 minutes or 20 minutes. And it really is like, what does this episode need? And so I almost like the show more in form and in structure than I do in like the actual delivery sometimes, because it does take risks that I wish more shows took on television. We got into this like formula, in the mid 2010s where every show had to be like 45 to 60 minutes and it had to have like these big questions answered and these resolutions. And some could take some cool chances. Like there were some great shows from then, but like peak prestige TV got very formulaic in a way. And I do like how the
mm,
bear kind of shakes that up and is like, sometimes this can be comedy episode. Sometimes this is just like a focus on one individual person going through like a single day. Another time this is flashbacks and all these, big questions about our lives. But within that risk taking, like I think to your point, RJ, you don't commit as much. So it either works or it doesn't.
it's such a risky
Brian,
show, which I think is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Brian, what fish tour does the bear remind you most of?
Well, I just got finished writing about summer 2004 this past week.
Oh boy.
Um, and I would say at its worst, the bear reminds me of, well, no, I would say even at its best, because like there were some moments that unquestionably are musical highs on that summer that are basically just the band, the same way you feel towards the end of a really hard brunch shift, where you kind of hate everyone, you kind of hate yourself, you kind of need a shot of whiskey just to like survive. You need to like get into a fridge, a walk-in cooler, and just yell and scream. Um, but then you come outside and you plate this amazing dish and you're like, oh my God, somebody's going to eat that and they're going to love that. But they have no idea the chaos that's going behind the scenes. So that would be my answer.
I know you could do. I knew you could do it. I knew you could do it. We have a tour we need to talk about, but I guess first I'm going to tell you all we're continuing. Osiris is continuing to release Under the Scales episodes. We got them coming out all the way through the start of summer tour, and then we'll take a break so Fish can talk, and then we'll come back. But there's so many episodes, and in return, we're asking you all to please consider supporting us and our work, our volunteer creators. You can go to osirispod.com/premium to see more about that and to help us out. Greg Riley, who's watching on YouTube, happy 4th of July. Love your podcast. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Greg.
It's great to see everyone here. I guess I wanted to just tell you guys, I don't think we've had a show since the Goose shows last weekend, and I was in I was at the Man, which is, I think I've mentioned before that I'm like involved with the Man, so I was in this box, and there were these like guys in the box, and we came in, my wife and I came in, and we were like high-fiving everybody, and then someone like kind of heard me talk and was like, "Are you RJ?" And I was like, "Yep." And then it turns out there were like 2 dudes in there who are longtime listeners of the pod. It was their first time seeing Goose after listening to Goose for a long time. Brian, who sent me a message after, "Hey Brian." It was really cool to have like a bunch of people who knew us and knew Goose, but were experiencing their first Goose show. And I was able to like, be there with them. So thanks everybody for always saying that you love our show. It's really great.
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of messages online too, and it really means a lot to hear that, and it's really appreciated. So thank you.
Megan,
good shit.
What's going on with Moment with Meg?
A lot of stuff. Thanks, RJ. I just put out an interview with Greg Ormont from Pigeons, and he was great to talk to. So much energy, and is just been really open about all the things that's going on with his life right now. We had a really nice conversation. I just dropped that. And next week, we've got Peter from Goose coming out. So keep your eyes and ears peeled from that. We're going to talk about lots of fun stuff. And it was really fun to catch up with him kind of in the beginning of this tour, and really fun to reflect on the conversation after they're finishing just an absolutely incredible tour. And I'm really excited for all that's going on with Goose right now. And to get to talk to Peter was really special and exciting.
They had quite a tour.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a really
incredible.
interesting period in their history to follow. A lot happened over the last 12 months, and they're in a very, very good place musically, it seems. On stage, there are just vibes spilling out everywhere. I loved this tour. I thought it was some of the strongest music I'd heard from them possibly ever, which is really exciting to say, just based on the last 3 to 5 years.
I know. Can you believe that? Oh, I was just going to say that Cotter played like almost 150 songs for the first time.
That's crazy.
On that tour. That is so unbelievable. And I just kept thinking, if this is what they can do with someone who's just learning the music, like imagine what the fall is going to sound like.
Yeah, it's wild. I had just 2 friends who are big Goose fans just joined to watch the stream on Instagram. You know who you are. We're talking about Goose right now, but we're gonna start talking about Fish soon. So it's really awesome to see. Brian, this is for you. Goose 2024 equals Fish 1994. How do you feel about that?
I feel moderately good. I think I think it's a big statement. But here's the thing: for probably like 3 or 4 years, I kept saying that Goose was in their like Fish 92, Fish 93 period, like that. Those were 2 years, and then they moved on to 1994. I think that what would define Fish 94 for me is both extreme tightness, mastery of their songs and their overall sound, but also feeling the willingness to expand upon those sounds and get into really kind of terrifying and dangerous territory musically, like stuff that you can fall on your face in front of and then you have to recover. And it takes a lot for a band to actually get to that point where they feel really confident that they can take these risks. And I thought there were some outstanding jams throughout the summer tour, but I thought there were 2 in particular: the Madhuvan from Fiddlers and the Rockdale from Connecticut on the tour finale, where the band didn't just take a chance. They took a chance and they committed, and then they doubled down and they kept going and kept searching. And it got into, if Ryan Storm is listening, he knows I've spent the last 18 months battering him about how great the Glens Falls Madhuvan is, which has like 90 seconds of weird 1994 fishness. Those two jams, the Fiddler's Madhuvan and the Connecticut Rockdale, had like 8 or 9 minutes of it, and it just kept going and kept going. And if they can do that, like, man, the possibilities are endless over the next year or so. Like we're in a really good period with them.
Well, and if you want to hear Peter talk about that weirdness, definitely listen to my interview with him, because we get into that.
Look at that.
I'm happy to welcome Peter into the weird shit camp.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I think Goose is interested in that. It's so exciting seeing them take those risks together and play with such energy and patience. It's thrilling.
Before we get into our tour that we need to talk about today, which we will do eventually, as always, I want to just play a couple of voicemails
always
from our
get there.
last couple episodes.
Yeah, we do.
And I gotta say, we have some pushback here. I'll start with the pushback, and then we'll go to the next one.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Y'all, RJ and friends, this is Adam Niederprum down here in the heart of Texas in Austin. And I am calling to say thank you for doing a great job most of the time. It was thrown on Texas last episode around in reference to the summer 2015 shows in Austin and Grand Prairie. Yeah, these weren't great. I love that they came here. I grew up in the Northeast and have been in Texas for about 15 years, and I was just pumped that Fish was in Texas. But it made me, after I got over my little offendedness, I was like, yeah, they weren't great shows. Y'all are right. But what about some theories about why? Okay, theory number 1, why Fish is not good in Texas. 1, distance. It takes forever to get here and forever to leave. I mean, just to leave the state, I've got to drive between like 5.5 and 11 hours, depending on the direction. So yeah, we're stuck between LA and Georgia on most of the tours. And recently they've just passed us by. Theory number 2, because of that distance, we've kind of got a little bit of a barren fan base here. I've been lucky to meet some good folks. But, if you're not establishing that, every few years routine, there's only been 5 shows since 3.0 in Texas. I think we're lucky to get every one, minus the ACL appearance. Yeah, I think that's a factor too, especially when you're not sort of, giving the fan base reason to come out, and then all of a sudden 8 years later you got a random Wednesday show in a weird venue, Ariana Grande's town of Grand Prairie. You have to fact check that. It might be Selena Gomez. Anywho, those are my 2 theories.
I love
but I do gotta say, 7/31/2018 set 2 in Austin, not half bad, and everything's right into Down Disease. It was lovely. Other theory or more justification here, sometimes you gotta have some rough shows to get to the good ones. In 2015, the Texas shows were not great, but then you had an incredible run, maybe the best run on the tour, besides Magdeburg, in Georgia. So it all works out. I wanted to say thanks, y'all. This was really fun to get thinking about this and thinking about tours. So hopefully, if Fish doesn't come to Texas anymore, hopefully you guys do for some kind of Goose show or whatever band you're into these days. And thanks, y'all.
How do you know? Thank you, Adam.
Wow, who knew?
Can I
love
just
this-
say like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
couple
go ahead.
things? Because that is one of my favorite voicemails we've ever gotten. One, the distance, man, like, this, RJ, like there's a significant part of the plot of the book Lonesome Dove, and I'm talking like 150, 200 pages about how hard it is to get into and get out of Texas. Like July Johnson like gets off course by like a week and a half, and it throws off everything in the book. Just leaving that state is a part of it. He's absolutely right about 7/31/18. My God, that second set First set, like I said last week, Mike took off his pants. That was a huge thing. The second set, though, that is glowing. That is the first truly capital G, great, everything's right. And I was 18th row, dead center, just staring at Trey, being like, oh my God, you got it. You got it. You figured it out with this song. It was the best. And 3, I think he has a great connection to this week. So we will talk about that here when we get to this episode.
Mm.
I love that the theory is they have to have bad shows, and so they might as well be in Texas.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
it right there.
I love that. Thanks for taking that for the team, Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you, Adam. Thanks for the voicemail. We have one more, and then we can get into our current tour. Good morning, everybody watching. Thanks for joining us on this 4th of July morning. We're feeling patriotic, and given the state of the country, beautiful time to be an American. All right, here we go.
Hi, this is Ben in DC again. I was at that 8/15/15 Merriweather show, and I fully agree with you. That was an amazing show. So that was the first of 2 nights at Merriweather, and that was the Saturday show. And I remember at the time we were recalling the old adage, never miss a Sunday show, and we were asking ourselves, like, how are they possibly going to top that tomorrow night? And the answer turned out to be that they didn't, but that's okay. They didn't have to. I think that I have an answer to the question you're asking about why that show was when it was and why it wasn't like a night or 2 nights earlier. And I think the explanation is simpler than what you're proposing, which is that the Merriweather shows are just always on Saturday and Sunday. So that's when it had to be. So as for why they're always on Saturday and Sunday, I don't know for sure. I think it may have to do with local curfews. I know that there is a curfew that they have to be done playing by a certain time. So it's possible that that's later on the weekends, and it'll be even earlier on the weekdays. So I don't know, but that's my best explanation for why that is.
All right, thanks, Ben.
Yeah, because the Merriweather's like in a shopping mall. Like it's in a part of Columbia that like there's like residential areas like right outside of it. That makes sense. I've seen shows there during the week that got out at like 10:30 or 11. I do just remember walking into 8/16/2015 with a friend of mine and having a very similar conversation to what that listener said, which was, we're either walking into the best Fish show we've ever seen, or we're walking into confirmation that last night was one of the best Fish shows we've ever seen. You can't lose. And 8/16/15 was not a great show, but like it just confirmed, man, you saw something for the ages the night before.
Yeah, it was a good show. Good tour. Okay, I think we're ready. We are here to
ready.
talk about winter
it.
1999. Are you guys ready? Because we're going there. So we're gonna talk about this and Megan can give us a little bit of detail on the tour. But this was ranked number 12 by us and number 11 by fans. And I guess, do we want to talk about the tour overview first, or do we want to just get straight to my first question, which is this tour overrated, and should it really be in the top 12 of this series?
You just asked the question. There's no going back.
Yeah, we're in.
Meg, why don't you kick us off with this? Because I think this brings up a larger conversation that we've been having behind the scenes.
Well, to be fully transparent, I drafted this tour in this spot, and I thought it was deserving of this spot at the time. This tour has some incredible jams. It's got creative use of effects, incredible layering, wild set listing. They repeat songs often. They open and encore with songs rarely in these spots. There's bust outs, but there's a lot of repetition in the jamming and also a lot of unevenness in the shows. I think there's some really high highs and some kind of uneven set lists. And I'm really curious as if we are going to feel this way as we continue to go through the top 10, because the jamming does start to sound so one note when you're comparing it to Modern Fish. I think it's listening to Modern Fish and the incredible amount of diversity in jamming is just, and the excellent set list flow that is kind of a commonplace now. It's really interesting to kind of put that up against these older tours where, the lack of flow can really affect it. And also the jamming does start to sound repetitive, even when it's transcendent. The others start to sound, when they're having kind of one defining sound, it really does, when you listen to 14 shows of it, start to sound a lot the same. It reminded me a lot of Japan 2000, of how I felt when I was listening to that, which makes sense because it's chronologically very close, but felt slightly overrated as a tour, but there were just incredible highlights. So that's a little bit how I felt when I was listening to the tour. What did you guys think?
Well, I just want to say that we did each draft, but we each drafted these tours, and we took turns and did like a draft over text. But I think we're like all in this. I think we were very much all in this together. So I think I take collective.
Thanks.
I think it's collective responsibility, because I didn't like I would have done the
We
same
all
thing
signed
if
off
it
on
was my
these.
picked. Yeah. So I don't want
Yeah,
you to
yeah.
take the brunt of it if you feel differently now, because we all kind of like, I think we all did this. And I don't know, Brian, I want to hear your thoughts, because I have some thoughts, but I want to hear yours first.
Well, I just want to clarify for the audience from a process standpoint. The only tour that we disagreed on was when I picked Summer 2003 as the number one tour in Fish history. RJ wouldn't allow that. We got into a pretty big fight. We ended up having to cancel the draft for a couple of days. We didn't talk. It was bad. We figured things out though. Because that compromise, that is America. Okay. This tour, I'm going to pose a question to you guys because we kind of talked about this last week. Sorry, I'm posing a question within a question. We need like a parenthetical around this. But if Cypress was not the end point of this tour, would we be talking about it?
Yeah. I totally agree. I think I
Yeah.
don't know if we would. Yeah.
I think
It's such a
that's
lead up.
my yeah, that's definitely one of the main themes for me, is like we're leading up to Big Cypress. And I guess just to follow up on
Yeah.
what Megan was saying, and I do think this viewer on YouTube, Mario, this is kind of one of the main arguments for this tour, which is the Raleigh Tweezer, which is my top
Yeah.
5 jams of all time. I do not take that list of top 5 jams, lightly. But I don't like, and I don't want people coming at us with you don't know anything about music, or you haven't listened to this tour enough. I'm good on both, and I'm going to tell you that this is like 12:15, which is a great show, and in the past, like, probably would have said this is like a great show, but listening to it in the context of the tour, it felt like the whole thing was building toward one jam. It was like
Yeah.
every jam was just like a continuation of the previous jam, and it kind of got better. Like, that's why 12:16 I think is so great. But I don't think if Big Cypress was at the end of December, we would be talking about this 14 show tour. Like, if it just
Yeah.
ended and there was no New Year's Eve, I think it kind of like, besides
Or just a New
two or
Year's
three
Eve run,
shows,
like a
yeah,
Yeah.
or just a regular one. I think you like 2 or 3 shows stick out. Like many of the tours that we didn't get in the top 25, I think, you got 2 or 3 amazing shows, and then like the rest fades into history without Big Cypress.
So I want to make an argument in favor of it being here while also agreeing with both of you. I do think that, and we've talked about this offline, how interesting it will be, because we drafted these tours knowing them, but not having spent so much like intentional time with each of these tours over the course of a week, where you're just completely immersed in it. So like all of us knew these tours and knew the history of everything. But it's different when you actually go through the process of listening to them in full the way that we are right now. So we've talked about towards the end of this, kind of looking back and seeing what we may change and whatnot. I think that this tour would still be in the top 25. I think it is one of the best tours. And I think the reason for it is it's a reflection of a band that is still growing in a lot of ways. You see this across rock history, that artists find a sound that they love. It fits their gear. It fits the way that they are writing songs. It fits the way that they're improvising if you're a jam band, and they go all in on a unified sound. And this tour is a unified sound that perhaps it's structural to prepare themselves to play an all-night set, where the jamming kind of has this layered groove that has repetition that allows you at 4 o'clock in the morning to deliver high quality jams, which will come. But it's also very different from what we hear today, which is more of a like mosaic type approach to jamming. Like these jams are, once they leave, we build layers, we riff, we build to a peak. It's epic, it's blissful, there's white lights everywhere. And then when they can break that down and it's all around the groove. Nowadays, they're changing keys and they're changing, tempo, and they're going into, really weird dynamics and places where they're playing kind of abstract, bizarre music. And then that leads somehow back into a melodic peak. There's just so much more going on today because they have years to pick from. In 1999, they were still building on this kind of deconstruction that happened after 1995, where everything went around the groove and went around simplification. And you're seeing what the result of that is over 3 years of experimentation. So I think that is both to its benefit, where like you hear a Winter 99 jam and you're like, my God, shoegaze Trey, like this is as My Bloody Valentine as Fish is ever going to be. This is as slow dive as they're ever going to be. But then you hear that 6 times and you're like, okay, what else do you have to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you hear that after listening to a tour that sounds totally diverse, like 2015. I think that's what's
Mhm.
also been so interesting about this series is that we're not listening to these tours chronologically. So you're comparing it to
Yeah, that's
all
a good
these
point.
different music that sounds like, yeah, when they're pulling from 30 years of playing together versus 15, it makes a difference.
Whereas last year, you would hear a 98 show and then a 99 show and then a
Yeah.
2000 show. And it all kind of made sense in terms of how the band was evolving. Even when you threw in those tab shows and, the side projects, you were like, oh, I can hear what this artist brought to Fish at this point in time and what they're bringing here.
Yeah.
And when you talk about tab, I mean, so you listen to like a 25-minute sand. There's like they do it almost every show this tour. It's great, but it's basically Mike playing the same bass line for 25 minutes. It's crazy.
Yes.
Like to your
I
point,
know, right?
like both what you guys are saying. You think about like a 25-minute sand right now, like today, it's like
It's off the deep
there's
end.
major key shit. There's like them like pressing buttons and doing weird shit. Like Mike's not even gonna play the main bass line for more than 1 minute,
Yeah.
and
The
like
goal now is to get away from it almost as
yeah,
quickly
it's
as
just
possible.
Yeah.
so crazy. So like I know people love this tour and I like listening to it, but I think it feels so makes me feel like we are all such like lame old Fish fans for talking about how amazing Fish is right now, but I think it's actually true in terms of the dynamic nature of the music and jams these days compared to
Yes.
where it was at this point. It's so different. I want to just say
Totally.
quickly, so Mr. Minor, Dave Calarco,
Mm.
kind of coined this idea, millennial, like the millennial sound, right? Which is it kind of comes into full view, and it's a lot of what you were describing earlier, both of you, about the sound. But our friend Rob Mitchum, who's doing 25th anniversary reviews of
Mm.
every show, so he's on Summer '99 right now. We talked about this in our Summer '99 episode, but it also applies to this. In Rob's first review of Summer '99 for 7.3, he was like, why are the audience tapes so bad? And like
I know.
throughout the entire 99, like it wasn't in 98, 2000 kind of, but like something happened. And like when you listen to 1216, it sounds like a totally different band, and
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like, are we like the dynamic sound of even the sand of 1216, there's more effects, there's more like layering, and I don't know if they're like progressing in the tour or if we're just not hearing it as well because like the previous shows, like the sound just isn't as good. So I wonder how
What
much of it is like not having access to these soundboards. There's not a single live bait track from
isn't
this
that
tour
insane?
released.
I know.
It's fucking
How is that
travesty.
possible? And I also feel
What
like
are we
that affected
doing?
my ability to enjoy
Jesus.
this tour, to listen to the whole thing. Because listening to like kind of not great audience tapes for the whole tour when the sound is so quiet at times, it's really it's hard. It feels like you're listening to a different band when you listen to the 2 live releases. It's crazy.
Sorry, one more thing. We just had a live bait released 2 weeks ago. That was a perfect opportunity to release the 12/7 Haley's Comet or the Grand
Yes.
Rapids track. And it's maddening. It's truly maddening. There's not a single, like, not even a track. What are you waiting for? Are they going to release the entire tour at some point along with Big Cypress? If that's the justification, I'm fine. But if not,
I'm into that.
something's
Yeah,
wrong.
we can do that.
Actually, sorry, Brian. To the 12/4 split up and melt has been released. But still,
12-4 has.
but like everything else is valid still. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Well, I agree with you guys. I think Fall 98 through the end of 1.0 is an era that benefits from soundboard release more than any other era in Fish history. And I think, and Rob talks about this in that essay on 7.3. He went to 7.23 through the end of the tour, so like the Midwest around Ohio to Deer Creek, of which includes 7.25.99, which Kevin Shapiro, if you are listening, absolutely needs to be released on soundboard. Sorry, had to get that one in. Rob talks in the essay about how even when he was in the venue at the shows, he wasn't hearing things that he ultimately heard on the soundboard. And he talks
Wow.
about the 7.1.99 disease that was released that on audience tape sounds like just a torrent of notes and aggressive soloing from Trey. But when you listen to the live bait release, every time he kind of pauses a riff, there's all these layers that
Yeah.
emerge.
Mm.
And you get that on anything do you hear from this era. And, you know, like you guys, Fish tapes, audience tapes are the reason I became a Fish fan. No other band was passing me audience tapes of their shows that were completely different from the other ones. No other band had audience, the Grateful Dead, obviously jam bands, but like what I was listening at the time, Fish was my entrance. There are certain tours, Fall 94, Summer 95, that to me, you just have to listen to on an audience tape. Like you have to hear the crowd, you have to hear the band in that cavernous space playing that kind of weird music. But then there are other tours like the late 90s where I have to hear it in soundboard to really get it because there's so much going on. A perfect example, 12/3/99, a really fascinating show where the band
Yeah.
Trey deliberately does not solo in that show. The entire goal of that show, as far as I can hear and from what I've read, is unified jamming and unified playing. So even in songs like Possum, he's not taking like a full lead solo. A show like that would be elevated so much more if you knew what was happening below the surface, which you're only going to get with the soundboards.
Yeah. It's criminal not to have that Haley's out. Apparently
Criminal.
it's been released from the archives, but come on.
It's ridiculous. The
I
whole
need
thing
it on my live
just
bait app.
makes me so angry.
At this
and I
point,
usually
if you're
don't
going
get
to play
angry.
it on From the Archives, like those,
Right.
we have
Well,
so many great From
yeah.
the Archives going back 25 years now that should be released on the Live Fish app. Like we have the soundboards, you've played them for people. Let's just release this, a whole From the Archives series with a special for you to sign up for Live Fish at a discounted rate because we're releasing this. Come on.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Megan, do you want to talk about the tour, or are we like, or do we blow by that segment already?
We can blow by it. I mean, I think the only thing that's important to talk about is just that, like Trey formed the trio this year and the Sicket disc came out. I think those are both really important things. And they started recording Farmhouse. I think those three things really affected the music on this tour. But yeah, 14 shows in 16 days. And Midwest, Northeast, down the East Coast, ending in Hampton. It has that kind of marathon feel to it. Obviously, the lead up to Big Cypress. 46 entries on the jam chart. I'm going to be very careful how I say this today. 3.3 jam charted songs per show. So not jams per show, as I misspoke, Charlie, but 3.3 notable jam charted songs per show.
Megan, I
Could
would.
the jam chart just chart jams? Would that be like possible? Could that just be what the jam chart is? Could it just chart jams? I don't know. Am I asking
That
too
would
much
kind
right
of
now?
make sense. Yeah, that would kind of make sense.
Megan, I would like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to retract your apology to Charlie myself, because you know what? First of all, we don't need jam splaining. We don't need the original jam splainer to come in here and I think everyone understands. Also, like, of course there are other jams that aren't jam charted. I mean, if you
Why?
don't know that, then you shouldn't be like here.
I
or
don't
listening.
understand that.
I
That
don't
is not
understand why there's
justification.
not, but okay.
I also don't understand why debuts are jam charted. I don't understand.
That doesn't make any sense to me. It's a debut, not a jam, but it's on the
Okay.
jam chart.
Let's take a. This is too
Get us
too much.
back
We
on
gotta
track
take a
here.
we gotta take a quick break, and then we're gonna talk about it, the shows and jams of the tour. All right. Okay. So, guys, let's talk. Do you want to do like two? Should we do 2 jams each?
Yeah, let's do that.
Sure.
What do you
I
got,
think
wanna
you
Meg?
start?
start,
Yeah.
RJ, and I think you should talk about the song you want to talk about first.
I mean, if we want to just go straight there, I mean, we can do that.
Oh.
Okay, 12-16 Tweezer, as I mentioned before, top 5 jams of all time. It brings me to tears every time still. There's a nice rhythm section in this jam, and then this organic, emotional, heavy, full of feeling groove comes out of it. It's so blissful. It's so like, but it's like calm, but it's one of the most beautiful segments of Fish, I think, that they've come upon. And it does feel very like organic, and it's just a stunning piece of music that I think is still like every time I listen to it, I'm like, this is fucking incredible. So thank God they released this on Soundboard, or else many people probably wouldn't know how great it is.
It's a really cool jam in the sense that it both seems to accomplish the goals that the band from the outside seemed to have at the during this tour, which was that unified groove that like really supports, like there's no band member standing out, but then at the same time Trey proves why he is one of the greatest guitarists of all time, because that riff that he comes up with is just
Yeah.
iconic. It sounds very inspired by like television, by shoegaze artists of the early 90s, but it also sounds completely Trey. It's really fluid in its delivery. It's really powerful, but it just like it reminds me almost of the Bliss section on the back end of the 12-6-97 Tweezer.
Yeah.
Or it goes into Isabella. It's just it's heart-wrenching what he does, and it's something that only Trey could come up with in that. But it also it's not him showing off in any way. It's him just like restraining himself, but also being at peak Trey. It is unbelievable.
Well, it also, everyone else is totally matching him. I mean, the way that Paige is on the piano in this jam, and him and Trey are like trading back those 2 chords during that riff, and then the way that Fishman is drumming, just those wild fills. And he keeps it going throughout the whole time. It's just got that perfect kind of almost slave-like peak, but not, but it's easier and kind of more effortless. It's absolutely beautiful, and the ending is melting, and Paige is on the piano. It's just absolutely perfect. It's a perfect jam. And it kind of embodies all that's good about this tour, but then also has a little bit more heart than a lot of the other jams do.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I think to me, it reminds me a lot of the Denver Ghost from 97, which we talked to Trey
Yeah.
about, and Trey described that as like he was like basically just riding in the wake of Paige's keys.
Yeah.
And it's like interesting to think about from that perspective, because I think listening to these jams, we think about Trey leading it, but it's probably the same thing him, right? Here, right? Like you can hear Paige's
think so.
piano and Trey's kind of like on it. I mean, it's just a stunning piece of music. And we've talked about this a lot, like with like the Tahoe Tweezer and like the Ruby Waves from Alpine, like these amazing jams that feel like they're pushing in the direction on purpose, which I think is great. And I think jams like this are the opposite, where they just like find themselves in this place organically, which I think is so special. Like they're both great, but I think they're totally different approaches in terms of improv.
That kind of gets to like a larger theme that I think we've talked a little bit about on this episode, but about why I think this tour is here is the band was almost able to play in their sleep at this point in time. Like they fell into this. It's not like they're really trying to break through anything the way that you would hear in 94, 95, or, like you said, that Ruby Waves from Alpine. Like that sounds like a band that is trying to jam for 38 minutes and see what happens. Tahoe Tweezer, same way. This just sounds like a band that just can jam 25, 26 minutes in their sleep. And they know that. And so sometimes, and that's the best thing for them to play right now is a long jam. But sometimes those jams can be repetitive, and other times you just can't avoid falling into absolute magic like they do here.
And I guess that does it for the episode.
Can't say much more. We should have saved the Raleigh Tweezer for the end, because what else are you supposed to say?
What else? What do you got, Megan?
I want to talk about the Haleys because it's the other best jam on this tour, and
Oh
it's
God.
just it's in the first set, which is just crazy to me. But this is has such a momentum and a groove based drive to it, but it crescendos like this giant wave. And when I was listening to this, I was reading a book that you recommended, RJ, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is a fantastic read. And in it, one of the characters is talking about a print they have in their room, and it's the Great Wave. It's the Great Wave of Kanagawa. It's a Japanese wood block print from like the 1800s, and everybody's probably seen it. It's actually the emoji for a wave, but it's like one big giant blue wave, and then there's all these little waves underneath it. And that's what this jam felt like to me. There's just this larger wave kind of cresting, but all these smaller waves bubbling and surging beneath it with just this intensity to it. And it's just a beautiful jam, and how it melts down just to the littlest whisper and lands in coil. It's just like perfect chef's kiss set list right there. So I love this jam.
Can you imagine what this would sound like on soundboard?
Can you? I
Maybe
can't.
maybe they forgot to record most of these shows, and they were like, "Shit, we should have captured these shows."
There's no
I mean, it would be
way.
like
They just didn't hit
They-
record that night.
Yeah. But we
I would
know they
pay I
have
would pay
this.
so much money to hear this on soundboard.
I
So
know.
much.
There is a really good YouTube video of this entire jam. Steadicam YouTube
Oh, I've
video
never
that
seen
someone
that.
took from the show. It's awesome. It's from kind of maybe halfway, 3/4 back of the arena. So like you get the full arena. It's not as much of like a close up on the band. Really awesome to see what Kuroda's lights looked like. You forget that like he just would kind of find a palette and just hang on that and make very subtle shifts. It wasn't this kind of like overwhelming. The lights are moving. They're always doing something. It's awesome, and it's definitely worth seeing. It's not in soundboard because it was filmed by someone who was in the venue. But yeah, that jam is that's I think it's on the same level as the tweezer in terms of they find an idea and they just build on it slowly. Like you're getting 27 minutes of build. It is unbelievable stuff.
And I think this tour is at its best when it is balancing that groove approach with the like excitement and enthusiasm that's leading to Big Cypress, which I think you don't get that much, but when it happens in some of these shows, it's really great. And the 1210 tweezer I think is another one that goes in this direction. That's really like it ends in that place, which is really cool. Brian,
I think
what do you got, Brian?
The Ghost
Oh,
from
sorry.
1211 also does that. Sorry, no, I was just like
Yeah.
there are good examples of it. You're absolutely right. I would like to shift gears slightly and recommend a
Please.
little bit of a weird shit jam because
Yeah.
the other aspect of Big Cypress is that you get the roses are free late in the set. You get jams like the Piper that are hyper weird towards the end of that show. And part of the goal of Big Cypress was we're going to be playing late in the night. What's the weird music that we can come out of? So there are a couple jams that hint to that. One of them is from the second night of tour. One of my favorite shows, a show I'd love to have released, which is 12/3/99, and it's the Limb by Limb. This is about 16 minutes. Fairly standard, beautiful Limb by Limb. I'm a huge fan of the Limb by Limb jam, even when it just stays totally type 1. But then it kind of departs around 8 minutes, and you get this dark, very kind of weird jam with Trey on his keyboards. It gets very atmospheric, pretty abstract, gets into kind of ambient territories, all my stuff. Like this is what I'm looking for. And you get this after a very, very standard 16-minute sand to open the set. But this is that show that I was talking about earlier where like there's almost no soloing from Trey whatsoever. It is literally the band like slowly emerging out of like the cocoon together, and like they're just taking their first steps as a unified piece. And this Limb by Limb just exemplifies it perfectly. There's a couple other jams like this on the tour, but it's kind of that, that if the tweezer and the Haleys represents like the light of where the band was at this point in time, the very blissful jamming that they could get into through groove jamming, the Limb by Limb is the darkness and kind of the weird side of it. And I just love it as that contrast.
I think the show is actually like a perfect representative show of 99 because it doesn't have
Yeah.
that like beautiful like jam like the tweezer or the Haleys, but it has like a well played first set, with like that possum that you mentioned earlier, that just is really interesting because it doesn't sound like a possum jam. But then the second set is just like classic 99.
Yeah.
I just want to. Earlier I said that the new live bait would be a perfect opportunity to release the Haleys, and I was in my mind I was thinking about the Van Andel Haleys from 1998, not the Portland Haleys from 1999. I'm so sorry. I've probably already gotten a bunch of emails about that, so apologize for that misstatement. What about the 1213 Piper? Because that to me is like a pretty interesting and different kind of jam, like really shredding, but then Page comes in with some like interesting piano, like a Page driven kind of piano jam, which turns pretty interesting. I feel like that's a fun and dark and kind of shredding Piper, but without too much like droning repetition.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you get Trey on the keyboard that changes things up. Sorry, go ahead, Meg.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very driving. And I also really love the sand from this show too. It has like a grittiness to it. It's almost like sandpaper rubbing together underneath the jam. It's really industrial. And I love how Trey finds those like lines to kind of soar above it and just goes off in the last few minutes. I would also really like to hear this as a live bait. We have a lot of ideas for live bait.
Yeah,
So
just put
many
us to work,
ideas.
Kevin. You got interns available. Yeah, this sand and the sand from 1216, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
They're the ones that start to kind of push at the edges of what is possible within sand.
Yeah, true.
It almost feels like the bass and drums being the exact same for however long the jam is going to be starts to feel almost like a raga, where it's just like, can you get into this meditative state of groove? And the version from Cypress, which famously has been updated to be a near 40-minute version of Sand because quadraphonic toppling apparently has never happened. I don't want to bring up bad
Don't even
memories,
get me
Meg.
started.
But like this Sand and the 1216 one kind of lead to what is possible within that Cypress version, where the band, I think that happens at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. They're probably noticing that some people have like fallen asleep. The people that are really like still awake and engaged are like right there with the band. But like this is the time when they're kind of going off and on the stage to, use the restroom, maybe grab some food. Like they're playing for 7 hours straight. And within that, they find this really weird musical space. I think you kind of get hints of what will lead to that within this Sand, within 1216. But I totally agree with you, RJ. That Piper is like, it's like two jams because it builds this rockin' peak and it's late in set one and they're just like fully feeling it. And then it just goes off this, like it takes this left turn that takes you down this weird wooded path. It's that moment in Oh, the Places You'll Go, where like sometimes you end up on like the lonely side street. Like that's what happens in this, but like give me more of that.
It's so great. Anything else? Any other jams you guys want to point out before we talk about a couple shows?
I would like to throw a nod to the Drowned from 1212.
Yeah.
Another just really weird long show a jam that Trey dedicated to his grandfather who had recently passed away, and it's just cool to hear that following the conclusion of this 30-minute version. They were on a really good stretch there from 1211 1210 to 1213. Those four shows have a ton of highlights and just a lot of diverse jamming. And I think specifically this Drowned shows you kind of that dark underbelly of them.
Megan, I know you love the show, the 1211 show.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very Megan show. And I know Brian and I have maybe differing opinions on this show a little bit, but we've briefly discussed it, but not in depth. Yeah, this is my dream set list, but this ghost from this show is really great. I think you mentioned it briefly, Brian, but it starts out in that same kind of repetitive groove, but they really toy with it as they let it build. And when the synths come in, it just changes the dynamic so much. And Fishman's just got the crowd going and everybody just starts clapping. And the last 5 minutes are like super exploratory, and you have that spaceship landing and alien abduction vibes. And I think this with the 2001 in the set, super fun and more energetic than a lot of the jams. from this tour.
Yeah, it feels like in this show, it starts to feel more patient. Like the patience and letting the noise kind of develop over the
Mhm.
course of a jam, which I think the Ghost has that. There's a lot of slow pacing, and there's not a lot of like, I don't know, starting with that Boogie On and this Sneaking Sally, Ghost 2001. It's all just kind of like one slow groove, but it feels like they're kind of letting it develop, which is cool. And I wonder, Mario just said, I wonder how much forethought was put into creating a sound for Big Cypress set, because if you listen to this set, it's like basically an hour or more of like a groove. So if you're going to play a 7-hour set, like that's a pretty good way to set it up. So it's
Get rid of an
interesting.
hour of it.
Yeah. Can you imagine Fish playing a 7-hour set right now? Like there'd be
God.
70 songs.
I would
I
love.
can't
there'd be
wait till they
so
do
many
that at
songs.
Mondegreen.
So many songs. I don't even think they could they don't even have enough songs. I mean, I don't know. They obviously they still jam, but they're so much more song oriented now than they were in the winter of '99.
It'd be interesting because they've broken back towards more jam heavy
Yeah.
shows where like they play 14, 15 songs a show versus like 21. I do think you're right. There'd be like segments of the show that would be a little bit more normal versus segments that would probably get kind of weird and cool. Sometimes they master the single set thing and sometimes they don't, that's just, and then you kind of think of Cypress as that single set and then these additional 4 sets. 12, 11, 99, like I don't think they've ever written a better set list ever. Like that is, I remember logging on to nugs.net back in 2001 when I was first getting into Fish and figuring out shows to trade for and seeing this show and being like, that is not a real set list. Like I knew enough at the time to be like, they don't just play the good songs. Like there's always a segment of a show where you as a listener, it may not be your taste versus another. Like this is a greatest hit show. And it's the most old school feel show of the tour. It has an all fall down signal, which is really crazy. I remember reading that there were these giant orange balloons just going across the crowd before the show. I've read that they like came on a little bit later than people usually anticipate, like more than 30 minutes past ticket time, and so there was a full wave going around inside of the venue. Everything I've ever heard that was there was more energy in there than basically anything other than like Hampton Night 1 2009, and then they come out and open up with Harry Hood into a full Mike's Groove. Like that is just capitalizing the energy. My one criticism is I don't think that build up and hype comes out on the tape as well as it does in other areas. But I do think like if you just want to give someone like here is a perfect Fish set list in a single show, boom, this is it. Even the mule is perfectly placed. The Ghost, though, you're absolutely right, Meg. Like that is the highlight, and that's one of the highlights of the tours. And that the way that it spills over into 2001 and just kind of builds and builds for like 8 minutes, like 2001's coming, but they refuse to go in there. It's such a cool technique, and it matches what RJ's saying about just like it's like a unified groove across a whole set.
Yeah, and that's harder to do than people think. I think it sounds easy when you listen to it, but it's actually really hard to do, to play different songs but have such a unified flow to them. And I do just want to say that, like you're saying, Brian, the way that they open this show, the authority with which it opens, like the first hour is just thrilling, inspired Fish. Like I think if you were in the moment for this, you would just die. And the fact that this show is perfect, even though they played Circus and Son of a Mule, and I still love it, that just says a lot.
You don't like Circus? Can you expand on this?
It sounds like Rogue's best friend, and it's a little cheesy.
Have you ever heard Tom's story about this song?
I don't know if I have. No.
I believe that when they were playing Europe 98 and they were debuting it, Trey's mom turned to Tom and said, or maybe it was 97, turned to Tom and said, "This is one of the best songs you've ever written." And Tom had to break it to her that he didn't write the song.
That's awesome.
We're gonna have to talk about that offline because man, circus, my God.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to say quickly just about this show that so this is the Spectrum, of course, the legendary Spectrum in Philly that was demolished 10 years later, but this was kind of a and the final show was in 2009, was Pearl Jam 2009. But
Two
this is,
amazing Pearl Jam shows.
this is, it's the home of it was the home of the Flyers and the Sixers, and I mean, so many legendary shows, a lot of dead shows, and so I think like this was kind of the peak and toward the end of the Spectrum, but still, this is, this is a classic room in a classic city for Fish, and just really hit at the right time. It was good like plotting of the tour, kind of like pass through on
Yeah.
your way south.
And
You
and
know?
the tour routing is cool because it's all basically confined to either the East Coast or the Northeast. Obviously, a little bit of a shoot down south, a little bit of a shoot to the Midwest, but like you get these really classic Fish venues and Fish cities back to back to back to
Yeah.
back in a really cool way.
I got to see two shows at the Spectrum, one in 03 and one in I guess maybe only in 03. No, they played there in no, 2 in 03. And
Yeah.
as VT to boot says, it was a magnificent steel bucket. All right,
It's
what
my
other
favorite. It's my favorite venue to look up old pictures of on Google because, like, no matter if it's a basketball or hockey or concert, like game, like going on in there, like you can't. It's so long and so it's just like it doesn't work today in like how we build stadiums, but it is a perfect relic of the time.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And now we have the Wells Fargo Center, which is, different.
It's a
Okay.
stadium.
It's a stadium. All right, guys. So we have do you guys each want to do one more representative show, and then we can talk about our live Fish release, which is all of them?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll actually do one that leads into it. How about that? Leads into mine. So my show I want to talk about is 12/8, the second night of Portland. Speaking of classic Fish cities, classic Fish venues, this is the Cumberland County Civic Center. I believe these are the first two shows there since December 1995. I believe that's correct.
right.
They did not play there in 98, 97. Yeah, I think you're right.
That's right.
This is the night after that Haley's and the Bathtub Gin from 12/7 that are outstanding. We talked about. This is where I think they get the set list right in what is a set list that on paper should not work. Whereas 12/11/99 is like boom on paper. That is amazing. This is Limb by Limb, Back on the Train, Disease, Fast Enough for You, Yamar, Horse, Silent, Run Like an Antelope, all in the first set. Like that's just kind of whatever. Okay. But in the first set, you get a really cool jam in Limb by Limb to open things up, a really good jam in Down with Disease, a great jam in Yamar. In the second set, you get a really good Sand, Piper into Dogface Boy, a You Enjoy Myself that the vocal jam then goes into Tweezer Reprise. And
I
so
love
then
that.
they play Tweezer Reprise. They have not played Tweezer at this point on the tour. They open the next night or the next show, 12/10, with Tweezer in Philadelphia. And then you get an encore of Golgi and Tweezer Reprise. It's just a really cool, like kind of gimmicky show in some ways, but really good jamming. From a structural standpoint, it almost reminds me of 12/15 later on the tour, where it's just like every 3 songs you get like a 19-minute jam. And so even if you
Yeah.
don't love what happens in between, if you press play on the show, you're going to get those like, kind of standard performances, but then also like, okay, cool, we're back in jam land. And it's one of those shows that if it were released on soundboard, there's probably more sounds that we are not hearing that we would hear in this situation.
I love this show. The Fast Enough for You is even extended and just beautiful. Even the Antelope has like a jazzy jam on it and builds to like a really big noisy peak. This is, I think, one of the best shows on the tour by far.
All right. Meg, what else you got?
Well, a lot of the shows that I think are kind of the best we've talked about a little bit. I think I love 12/3. I love 12/8. I love 12/16. Also, I think the 12/7 show, it's fairly uneven, but I think what they need to do is do a Portland box set is really just like what they need to do, because
That's
like
it.
then you have the Haleys, then you also had the Gin from that show, which is just so ambient and vibey. And I was listening to it while I was reading at like 11:30 at night and kind of drifting off, but also like listening to the music. It's just perfect for that. It's so serene. I think both of those jams absolutely need to be released. The first set's kind of uneven and nothing too amazing, but I think
But you
that
get that Haley's.
you get the Haleys. And so a box set of both the Portland shows is a must.
And context tells everything, and the fact that the context leads up to that Haley's, that would be very interesting to listen to as like a
Yeah.
full release. I think that would be great. Yeah, my pick for Live Fish was a Portland box set release. I love when they do that. I love that they just did that with the Spectrum. I love that they did that with the Gorge 98 last year. I think that it's a really cool. They did that with St. Louis with 2 shows from different tours a couple of years ago. Like it's a cool snapshot of just where the band was at over a full run. And we all know that they succeed, I think, at their best when they play a full run, and they play a full run that feels like a unified piece. And these 2 shows feel that way in a lot of cases to my ears.
Yeah, back to back, they're pretty impressive. And
Yeah.
we listen to them back to back, and they sound amazing together. And yeah, I think they
Speaking of
should have
s-
released 12, 11.
Yeah. Speaking of sounding amazing together, we're having so much fun on this podcast, and we appreciate you tuning in. I guess, I don't know. Like these should all be released. I think the 12. I think 12, 13 is the other
Yeah.
one that I would go to. You get, like you said. I think you get a little bit more variety in the sand than in the earlier sands. But man, it's a like any of these shows being released would be exciting to me, because I think, like you said, Brian, we would hear different things that, like, still after listening to these shows for, I mean, I don't even know how many times. Like, I think we would hear new things. I think 12/16 sounded totally different when it came out on soundboard. It just like a huge realization.
I just want to go quickly through the shows that were played at the Providence Civic Center in the late 1990s, or in the 1990s by Fish, because it's insane. 12/29/94. We all know that very well. That is the Providence Bowie, one of the greatest jams that the band has ever played.
Maybe the best.
12/12, maybe the best. 12/12/95, a show we'll probably talk about at some point in the future. Hint, hint, hint.
Maybe.
Maybe gets a little bit overlooked because 12/11 is great, 12/14, like there's amazing stuff on that tour, but The Disease is 31 minutes and totally worth your time. Then 4/4/98 and 4/5/98, the Island tour, and then 12/13/99. Like in the
Wow.
90s, if Fish went to
Insane.
Providence, Rhode Island, you were
Don't
getting
miss.
amazing Fish.
That's
Since
5 for
then,
5.
that's 5 for
Yeah.
5. Since then, we've had 10/22, 2010. I would vouch for that show more than most people, but like I also love Fall 2010. But then 11/29/19 and 11/30/19, 2 of the better shows from a tour that has pretty much been forgotten. That is as much of like a COVID, just like memory hold tour that Fish has ever
Yeah.
played.
Yeah. Good Alaska in one of those shows.
Really cool Alaska. Yeah, good point.
That's what we got to say about this.
Like
I just wanna-
legitimately really cool, but yeah, that's it.
I want to say thank you
pickings
to.
are slim.
I really appreciate. I just want to say we all appreciate the work of the Tapers. We went a little bit hard on the sound this tour, but I don't think it was not the Tapers' fault. And without the Tapers, we wouldn't
No,
have
thank
anything.
God.
So
the style the
So-
band was playing in was probably very hard to capture on tape without blowing out. Like how could you turn Rob talks
Yeah.
about this. How could you turn the levels up to get all the nuance without like, then they come in with energy and like your whole speaker system is, washed out. Like they have to find the right levels, and the sound that they were playing in just didn't work in that sort of standpoint.
Well, and it sounds like
So
Rob
it
was saying
goes-
it was even hard in the audience to hear it when you were
Right.
there.
Like it
So,
wasn't coming out of the PA
yeah.
even.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys have any takeaways that we haven't talked about before we kind of wrap up?
I do. I was thinking about that. So we have 11 tours left, and only 3 of them are not in 1.0. And this is the last chronologically on the top tours that are left. So this is the latest in 1.0. And to me, it kind of makes sense that as this is the last 1.0 tour, they're they're maybe getting to a point creatively, and you were speaking to this, Brian, at the beginning, where they feel kind of content to sit as opposed to push and diversify. And we know that the vibe had majorly shifted during like the farmhouse recordings where Trey's bringing material from like the trio and him and Tom, and it's less collaborative. And that had to influence, how they were playing and how they were feeling about what they were doing together. And I think, yeah, this whole tour just feels like a push towards Big Cypress and a commitment to kind of patience and exploring jams in places where they wouldn't necessarily look, and just being willing to sit and kind of wait. And I think that it works for Big Cypress, and it totally worked in the moment. I think it's just really interesting and re-listen how it kind of hits.
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar takeaway because I'd be curious to know when the thoughts of taking a break started to percolate into the band's minds and maybe
Yeah.
intra-band conversation. Trey always talks about how when he walked off the stage at Big Cypress, he looked at Fishman and said, "We should break up." And like, what else are we going to do that is anything close to this? And I wonder if that was something he'd been feeling for a while, and it was just like, cool, we're never going to accomplish anything, or if that was legitimately in the moment. Because this sounds to me like we know now in hindsight that Fish has 10 months left after this tour. Like it's almost over from a 1.0 standpoint. And they sound towards the end of all the ideas that they've thought of to this point in time. Like they built up this
Yeah.
massive sound, and then they just reduced it, and they figured out like where are the minimal moments that like we need to focus on so we communicate as a complete band. And I don't really know where you go from here without a break, because the sound that they come back
Yeah.
with in 2003 is so different and sounds at times really inspired. Here it definitely sounds like a band that is towards the end of ideas and kind of needs a break. But still, as we've talked about throughout this episode, there are these moments of brilliance. And so there's like a part of me that wonders what would happen if Fish never took the break in 2000 and they just kind of let this play out and see when they're like, okay, let's inject a new sound into our approach here. They felt like they were evolving, just with the way that the music dictated them, though. And I kind of wonder what they would have done beyond this. So that's just like that was kicking around my head the whole time I was listening to this tour.
I wish for the second half of 99 that I could like build this like a basketball team. And I'd like to draft like the 9-9 show and the 9-14 show and the 9-29 show into this winter tour. Maybe do a couple trades. Then we'd have like a top, we'd have like a top 5 tour of all time if we could bring the best
Yeah,
of fall
for
99
sure.
into winter 99.
Bro,
The fact that we're not going to
you've
talk
just
about
created new content in the moment.
Oh, no.
2025 HF Pod will be drafting shows from a year to build out the greatest tour. See us then.
Ooh, that's so cool. I love that idea.
The fact that we won't be able to talk about the 9-14-99 AC/DC bag in this year is sad, but that's how it goes, right?
But maybe we'll get to talk about it next year then.
Maybe next year. But I think it's a weird year and a weird tour, because I think there's, like you said, there's moments of brilliance, and I think there's a lot that just feels disjointed and maybe a little, just like, I guess what you said about kind of like the breakup coming, and it's a strange thing to go back to, I think, but the moments of brilliance are really great. Brian, can you tell us what we're going to do next week?
Oh, I can.
Actually, it's not next week. It's 3 days.
No, it's
3 days
like
from
right
now.
away.
So we are, if you guys didn't notice, we are coming up on Fish's summer tour. They go on tour on the 19th, I believe. And so we will be pausing the top 25 tours episodes until after Dick's, which we will resume with tour number 11 through 1. So the whole fall and the winter will basically be us completing this, a sprint to the finish. To get us all ready for summer tour, we're going to do our third draft as a team. We are drafting shows from Fish venues. Megan did an amazing promo standing by a lake just a couple days ago. If you haven't seen it on Instagram, you have to. Someone sent it to me and was just like, you guys look like you are killing it right now. What promotion? Amazing stuff.
That's embarrassing.
No, it was
Did
great.
it.
You did an amazing
Someone,
job.
I may have gotten a couple of those messages too.
It was that is the promo HF Pod needs. RJ and I aren't able to do that.
Nope.
So we are going to be choosing from Great Woods, Connecticut, Alpine Valley, Missouri, Deer Creek, Michigan, upstate New York, which is freaking loaded,
Oh my God.
festivals, and Dick's. And we are each going to pick a show from each of those venues / regions so that we can build out our ultimate summer tour preview live bait, but full shows, not jams, full shows. So it's going to be a full show draft. It's going to be a ton of fun. It's going to work similar to our previous drafts, the Fish Years draft and Tweezer draft. Go around in, snake draft style. It may get competitive. We're all going in kind of relaxed on this one. I'm telling
I am
everyone,
not.
don't.
I
Well,
am not. Just so
if
you
you're going to
know,
listen to 9 shows between now and Sunday, I appreciate your efforts. I can't do that.
No, I'm not listening to them, but I don't remember the dates. Like I look at the numbers of shows and I don't know what it means. So I have to do a lot of prep. So I'm going to be up all Saturday night being like, what show is this? The list of upstate New York is like 45 shows. Like it's so out of control.
It's
Yeah, I tried to
intense.
limit no SPAC, no New York City region, and then everything past 1990, and it still was
So
45
crazy.
shows. They've played upstate New York a lot. So if you're in New York and you're complaining about tours, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
But it should be fun.
True.
There's a lot of really good stuff here. That's the point. And we're going to have a ton of fun with this and build out just shows that we recommend you guys check out before summer tour if you want to get regionally specific and appropriate.
We're going to
It's
be
gonna be so
back
fun.
on Sunday morning at 9:00, if you can believe it. So that's 3 days from now. So everyone think about all the stuff Brian just said, and we'll see you on Sunday morning. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Megan. Thanks everybody for listening and watching. Hope everybody has a great 4th of July.
Happy
Thanks,
4th.
everyone.
Go Cubs.
Go Phils. 205.